I recently decided to fire up my PlayStation 5 for the first time in quite some time to check out the beautiful Stellar Blade demo, and I actually really like this game. Not only is it flashy and stylish with good music, but the combat in it is actually really good, guys. Think about Metal Gear Revengeance, Devil May Cry, a bit of Sekiro in there. It's quite good. But this made me think of the PlayStation 5 Pro and the specs, because I am kind of a hardware head. I like gaming hardware. And I wanted to see if we could get Dragon's Dogma 2, one of the most controversial games as far as performance on console goes, to run at 60 FPS on a theoretical PlayStation 5 Pro. So let's go over the specs and the hardware I'll be using to match it and see, can we do 60 FPS in Dragon's Dogma 2 with and without ray tracing? Let's check it out. Richard Ledbetter of Digital Foundry wrote an article over at Eurogamer about the PlayStation 5 Pro specs that leaked, and what we have is practically the same Zen 2 8-core 16-thread CPU, except that it'll have a boost mode that goes up to 3.85 GHz for the PlayStation 5 Pro, a 33.5 teraflop 60 compute unit GPU, which more or less matches the RDNA 3 7800 XT, and based on what Sony said, a 2 to 3 times, sometimes even 4 times higher ray tracing capabilities than the PlayStation 5, which doesn't really match any RDNA 3. It could be something Sony created themselves, or maybe RDNA 4, I'm not sure. But this is what we have. For the CPU, I'll be using my own Zen 2 8-core 16-thread Ryzen 3700X, which is practically what's in the PlayStation 5. Now sure, the desktop CPU can boost higher to 4.4 GHz, and it does have more L3 cache, which give it an advantage over the PlayStation 5, but the PlayStation 5 also has access to much faster GDDR6 memory unified, and it's not running Windows in the background. And I'm also going to lock this CPU to 3.825 GHz on all-core, just like the new PlayStation 5 Pro's boost mode. Again, it's all theoretical. Now, for the GPU, a slightly downclocked 7800 XT would make sense, but I don't have one. So what I'm going to do instead is use a 6800 XT. Despite it only being 20 teraflops compared to 7800 XT's 37 teraflops because of the 7800 XT's dual issue FP32, in gaming they're practically identical. Here's how a few popular games compare between the 7800 XT and 6800 XT, done by Hardware Unboxed. And will you look at that 15 game average, they're practically identical. Let's get on with Dragon's Dogma 2 now. We're going to begin by targeting 1440p here. We will also check out 4K as well, obviously, but 1440p is a good starting point because a lot of games in their performance modes on console do target 1440p. Although they do also use dynamic resolution, we are using 1440p native. No dynamic resolution, no nothing. And we've also disabled ray tracing. For this part, we are going to check ray tracing on as well. I'm going to start this video in a little town called Checkpoint Rest Town. Well, it's not little, it's actually kind of big, but reason is because towns in this game, including the main city, are very CPU heavy. That's where the performance is the worst. And this gives us a chance to look at our processor and all the cores and threads. And as you can see, I've locked them all to 3.825 GHz, which is what the PlayStation 5 Pro's new boost mode is supposed to target. And this also gives us a chance to see how the game is utilizing all the cores and threads. And as you can see, the load is spread somewhat evenly, although there are some cores and threads that are quite a bit higher than the rest of them. What we can also see here is that our graphics card utilization, where it says 6800 XT, is well below 99%. Now that means that we are being CPU limited, because the graphics card cannot run at 99 fully utilized. That's what that means. Now you might say, well, CPU utilization is only at 55%. How are we CPU bound? Shouldn't it be at 99%? Well, that's unfortunately not how CPUs work in gaming. They're not usually fully utilized by games like software. Other programs may utilize CPU. Essentially what it is we're adding all the cores and threads and then taking an average, and that is what that 59% at the moment next to the 3700X is. Now, for the most part, though, we were able to maintain 60 FPS. We did dip below that in some parts, but that is the city where performance is the worst. How is it in the wild? Well, you spend 99% of your time. Well, that's what we're going to take a look at. We're going to go ahead and make our way down to Batal while keeping an eye on our frame rate. And for this part of the video, I've left the frame rate uncapped because I want to see how this processor behaves. And right now it's actually, we're getting some really good solid performance here. Our graphics card seems to be mostly fully utilized, although it is dropping, but that's okay. I actually have not yet looked at this game on the 3700X. This is the first time, so I'm actually kind of surprised how well it's doing right now. But again, there's not a whole lot going on here right now. We're not surrounded by forests or anything like that either, but so far so good. And if we take a look at our frame time, you can see that it's not perfectly still. Normally it's not going to be when your frame rate is uncapped. That's why consoles will usually cap the frame rate. That, and with consoles, developers know that not everyone's going to have a VRR capable display, right? This would lead to inconsistent frame rates and tearing and stuff like that. But we do have VRR here and we are testing the game. So I think that our frame times will be a lot more consistent once we lock the game to 60 FPS. But looking at some combat here, our processor seems to be doing pretty good. It is staying above 60, and that's kind of what we want to see in this particular case. But we finally made it down the hill and into this little foresty area. We kind of get a good idea that our frame times are not necessarily great. I think if we go ahead and cap it to 60, they should be a little bit better. So let's go ahead and do that. I just wanted to show you guys the settings here that Capcom has a frame rate capping setting. Frame rate, where it says variable, you can actually set it to 30 FPS, 60 FPS, or 120 FPS. Problem with that is, it doesn't actually do a very good job. I've tried it. The frame times are very inconsistent regardless. So what I'm doing here instead is I'm using the MSI Afterburner's Riva Tuner Statistics Server frame rate cap feature, which does a better job. And if you look at the frame times, they're actually a lot smoother. Now, our 3700X is not capable of maintaining 60 consistently, so we are dropping to the low 50s sometimes. For the most part, we are actually a lot closer to 60 mostly than we are not, even during combat here, as you can see. Now, I'm assuming that the PS5 Pro may perform in a similar level as far as CPU, right? Because I can't know for sure. There's different memory substructures. According to Digital Foundry, the most CPU equivalent to the PlayStation 5 and Series X right now is the Ryzen 3600. But even if you look at the 3600 versus 3700X online, there's not a huge difference between them, right? So even if, say, the PlayStation 5 Pro CPU was actually a bit weaker than my CPU right now, clocked at 3.825 gigahertz, it should at the very least be able to deliver a VRR experience that's between 48 FPS minimum, which is what it is for the PlayStation 5, to 60 FPS with VRR, which should feel a whole lot better than a lock 30 FPS, obviously. Now, interestingly enough, in this part, I ended up running into this outdoor boss here, which I've only encountered in Dragon's Dogma 1, actually. It's the first time I see it in Dragon's Dogma 2, but this kind of gives us a good opportunity just to see what type of performance we get when we're fighting a boss, right? Because there's a lot of things going on, and to my surprise, actually, it was doing really good. I mean, look at it. It's the frame times are flat. It's kind of what you want to see, and our CPU is able to maintain a consistent 60 FPS, no problem. But let us go ahead and skip towards the end of the battle, because I don't want this video to be a lot longer than it needs to be to deliver my message and my comparison. And then we're going to check out 1440p with ray tracing on, because right now we don't have ray tracing on. So we're close to the end of the fight here, and it took me around 16-17 minutes to defeat this boss. I skipped about 12 minutes ahead, guys. It was a long boss battle, but it was fun. I like long boss battles. But I kept an eye on the performance, and it was actually doing really, really well. It was pretty much flat throughout. It was very good. So, could this be a sign of things to come? Who knows? But what we do know is that we're not even close to fully utilizing our graphics card. We're only at around 60 or so %, so that means we have plenty of room in the budget to enable ray tracing or increase our resolution. But what we're gonna go with first is turn on ray tracing. So let's do that. Okay, so now it's ray tracing time. Let's take a look at the settings together so you can see that I've turned it on because I had to leave the game to be able to turn it on, and there it is. Ray tracing is on, and all the rest of the settings are maxed out. We're still at 1440p. We still have a 60 FPS cap. We're going to keep that on going forward because that's kind of the purpose of this video. Now, if we look at Sony's own claims, according to some developers, they've said that they're going to have around 2 to 3 times, sometimes even 4 times increase in ray tracing performance. Those are some bold claims, and if true, which I don't see why they wouldn't be, that's actually really good. It should actually be even more capable than my 6800 XT. It might even be as capable as my 3080 Ti in ray tracing. You never know. How the devs will utilize that is a whole other story. I suspect that the first-party studios will probably make of it the most. I'm actually very excited to see what the first-party studios do with a PS5 Pro, especially with the dual-issue FP32, because, you know, if you just look at the teraflops, right, the 6800 XT compared to the 7800 XT, the 7800 XT is almost twice the teraflops of my 6800 XT, but in gaming, they're practically identical. So it all depends how and if the developers will utilize the extra complexity, if you will, of the PlayStation 5. And I don't really see third-party or even second-party devs do that. I see first-party studios doing that. So I'm very, very curious to see what happens. But what's happening right now with our 6800 XT, we're actually able to stay at around the same frame rate, around 60. We're mostly at 60. It's not locked, but it's pretty close. GPU usage has gone up now, whereas previously it was around 40 to 50%. Now we're actually getting very close to 90-something %. So that's actually pretty good to see. And look at our frame times. They look really, really good. But it's not all sunshine and roses, though, because in this game, there are some problem areas and some heavier to run areas. So let's skip ahead a little bit and I'll show you what I'm talking about. Okay, so I'm making my way to this cave system here, and look at our frame times and frame rate as we enter this area here. It's terrible. Look at this. It actually feels horrible. And I've run into some of these spots. Even with my 4090 and 7800 X3D, there is a couple spots that become problematic like this. But then it's just a particular small area. I don't know what causes it, but we do have a lot of sand effects and weather effects here as well. So that could be adding to the load. I'm not entirely sure. But once we leave this problematic area, we go back to having more or less a close to 60 FPS experience. And the combat actually doesn't seem to affect things all that much. Although we're not getting as good of a frame rate as we were previously, it's still not bad. With a VRR display, it's pretty decent, I would say. But I have to say, though, that I do really like the ray tracing in this game. I think it adds a lot to the immersion with the global illumination and shadows especially. It does a really, really good job. Like, once you enter these cave areas and you turn ray tracing off, they just look kind of bland. Like, look at this. This looks so atmospheric with the sun seeping in and lighting up the rocks around it with the same color as the earth. It's pretty cool. It's very, very immersive, very atmospheric. I do really like it. But now in this area too, if you pay close attention to our frame time graph, we seem to be hitting these tiny little hitches for some reason. I'm not sure. But what we're going to do is we're going to try turning ray tracing off and see if it fixes it. And it seems to not have really fixed anything. Our frame times still look the same, but the cave actually doesn't look as good as it did with ray tracing now, does it? It's not as... Everything looks like it's, I don't know, it looks more artificial to me. But it still looks great, don't get me wrong. The game still looks really good, even with ray tracing turned off, don't get me wrong. It's more like icing on the cake. But for the last part of this video, I wanted to try 4K. And I have a feeling we're going to be GPU limited in this part. But I think we have some tools that we can tweak to be able to make a 4K 60 happen. Let's do it. We're going to begin with the settings here so you can see I've set the game to 4K. And I've left ray tracing off because I think it might be a little too much for us to be able to maintain a 4K 60 experience without using any FSR or dynamic resolution scale or anything like that. And we seem to be pretty close to 60, but our GPU use is at around 99% most of the case. So we are now depending on our graphics card processing power, and yeah, we are dipping below 60 here. We are in the low 50s sometime, so I don't think this will be able to deliver that. I do think we feel that the PS5 Pro will be very similar to 6800 XT as far as rasterization performance, right? So this kind of gives us a good perspective, and I actually can't wait till the PlayStation 5 Pro comes out so I can test it myself. But yeah, in my opinion, I think we should turn on FSR quality, and we should be able to at least deliver 60 FPS on our GPU side of things anyway. So what I'm going to do here is we're going to try FSR quality. FSR doesn't look the best in this game, neither does DLSS actually. They both don't look great, but it does a decent enough job. You know, it's pretty good. It looks good. At 4K, it does a pretty okay job, and there we go. We are able to deliver 60 FPS experience. Now we're well below 99% on GPU utilization. So it will be very interesting. The one thing I'm most excited about... Now, okay, I am a PC guy, right? I prefer PC, but I have nothing against consoles. I do like consoles as well, mostly because I like the custom nature of the hardware. Especially Sony's been doing a pretty good job with that, adding a lot of custom things to their silicon. So I do find stuff like that very interesting. And what interested me the most about the PlayStation 5 Pro is their machine learning based upscaling method. I forget what it's called, PlayStation Super Resolution or something like that. Now that has the chance to be something that's a game changer, because consoles have to rely on upscaling quite a bit. I mean, even if you have a powerful PC, some of these new games are very demanding. So to have a very good upscaler, I think that's a necessity these days, I feel. So I'm excited about that, and that has the potential to deliver some very nice gameplay experiences for console players. But the fact that the CPU is still the same, that is a bit of a concern. Although if it does perform similar to the 3700X in this case, it will be actually really cool. But anyway, guys, that'll be it for this video. Let me know what you think. Do you think my assumptions to put this hardware together as representative of the PlayStation 5 Pro was correct, or was it way off the mark? Again, this was just supposed to be out of curiosity type of thing based on the leaks. I think I probably came kind of close anyway. But let me know what you think, and leave a comment. Leave a like if you liked it, and subscribe if you want to see more content, although I am more of a PC focused channel, actually all PC focused, but I do enjoy touching a bit on consoles every now and then as well. No hate, I love all gaming hardware. But anyway, I'll hope I'll see you in the next one. Have a good one, bye bye.